we actually haven't touched a lot on what UX and UI design has actually been. It's actually a topic I actually find very fascinating because it's kind of like a secret sauce to so many areas. So in this episode, we're going to get down and talk about exactly what UX and UI is and how businesses can really adopt these practices to make them much more innovative. In fact, UX and UI design philosophy is something I believe that everyone should really adopt. We really should look to understand experiences from a consumer perspective and design that with that intentional experience in mind. And we chat about this a bit. And it's funny because I think UX design is such a big, broad term that most individuals don't seem to actually understand. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a breakdown. So UX design, it refers to user experience design. And then there's UI design, which actually stands for the user interface design. Now, both of these elements are actually really crucial to a product, and they work very closely together, but yet they have very different types of functions. So this is really important because when you're looking at it from an experience design perspective, and then you're like, okay, what does that interface need to look like? And they're looking at it across all the different channels, So we've got our phones, we've got our laptops, you got multiple different areas of how you're using it. And each platform for a phone, like whether you have an Apple phone or some other type of Android phone or whatever it is, they have very different screen sizes and all those pieces, and how we interact with it is very different. So it's quite an actual interesting dynamic of how they make it really kind of bespoke to each tailored tablet or mechanism that you're using to deliver you an experience. So it's really fantastic, and it's a really interesting thing. So it involves like the designing of the entire process. I mean, but not just from acquiring and integrating the product, but it's talking about also the branding and the design and usability and function. It's just really a very big ecosystem, and it's a really different principle of how you look at things. So it's kind of the marketing of it. There is definitely understanding things from all the different dimensions from a customer perspective. They look at it from an empathy perspective. It's a really amazing area. So in this episode, we end up talking about exactly what is UX UI design and why it's a big deal, and how Hipo is actually built on a philosophy of empathy. Oh, I love that. The power of a discovery sprint, how tech is not a disruptor, and the fastest growing segments looking to adapt UX design. And we even chat a little bit about how if you're kind of curious and want to know more, where you can go to learn more. And so much more is on this episode. I really hope you enjoy our chat. Cheers. Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. Hey innovators, I'm really lucky. I get Taylan Pince here, who is the CEO and founder of Hipo, a product studio that has helped launch businesses in a myriad of different types of industries. And I'm talking about from healthcare, finance, smart home, education, and natural science. It is amazing. He's been doing this for the past 2 decades, and he's been developing tech products that improve lives and change industries. He's got so much expertise in product design and development, as well as mobile, web, emerging technologies. Let's just talk about this. He's got a success track record of more than 100 companies, helping them with collecting over $10 billion collectively. Taylan, that is so impressive. Talk about impact and influence. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Sabna.
This is great. So can you, for our listeners, tell us what Hipo is?
Yeah, of course. As you've done a great job basically summarizing us, but basically we're a product company that helps either early stage startups or later stage startups build and launch products, and we can do everything from very early stage strategy and figuring out the target market, all the details of the application, the UX and UI design, as well as the scalable infrastructure, all the technology needs, be it web or mobile applications, or sometimes even desktop applications nowadays, and basically providing startups with a product team that's experienced and that's been working together for over a decade to launch successful products.
I love this. I love the space in the UX design area because there's just so many things we could talk about from the innovation side of what, is driving things. But out of curiosity, how did you guys come up with your name of the company, Hipo?
Yeah, there's a bit of a funny story behind it. The two core partners, we were on a safari in South Africa, actually in Kruger Park, before we founded the company, and we've been talking about this for years. And you see the big five and all the different animals, and we were amazed. And then that inspired us to basically use the name of the animal, but drop a P and make it a little bit unique.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So what made you guys decide to kind of launch Hipo? Like, what was the driving need for it?
It's really the driving force behind it was, to be honest, was Apple and the iPhone ecosystem. I was working for years as a developer, software developer in various startups in Toronto. And then the iPhone came out, and I just couldn't stop playing with them, couldn't stop imagining all the different products that you could build with it. It was so innovative back then. It's easy to forget, how different it was to look at that, amazing touchscreen. So I just said, I want to build things on this, and nobody was doing it really back then. So we started Hipo, and we started building some products of our own. That quickly led to helping others build their own products, and then we basically built up from there.
No, this is great because a couple of our listeners have actually reached out and kind of asked questions about what is the big deal about UX design, why should companies think about it? What advice would you give to those individuals? When you're thinking about a product, I think the UX and UI design is a great place to start. It becomes, you basically put yourself in the shoes of your user. You start thinking about their needs and desires and what they want to accomplish through your product, and then you start designing for them instead of imposing some technical requirements on them. So that's what we always try to do. We always try to figure out who's going to use this app, who's the demographic, what are their stories, what are their needs, and then go from there. So that's for us always the first step. I love when you say that, what's a company's story? How do you want people to experience it? And, it's so true. Like, I love that when companies put the needs of a consumers, like thinking about how we are going to use it and how we're going to interpret it. Because I still go to so many websites and I'm still like, I am so clueless. Like, I have no idea what to do or where to go. And I'm always looking at the help. And I can't get over how many companies haven't actually done this itself and they've done this research. What do you think it is? Is because it's so legacy and so old and hard to change things? That's why companies haven't, or they just don't know how to do it? Part of it is, of course, the internal culture. It's hard to imagine a better version of things that you already have sometimes. And most companies need some kind of outside help to, basically do some hand-holding, help them imagine that future. But it's possible for every product. There are so many products out there that have been designed, even 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they're still in the same mindset of, just imposing old school legacy user interfaces on users, whereas there are so many better ways of building and designing things nowadays. And it needs a different way of thinking, a more human-centric way of designing things. And I think you said it right off the bat, it's really hard to imagine how to improve things. Really hard. So is there some techniques that you guys kind of utilize to kind of help companies kind of go, we can shake things up?
Yeah, what we usually do is what we call a discovery sprint, but what it ends up being is a complete rethinking of whatever product that you're imagining or that you're actively using. So we get all the stakeholders in a room for 3 to 5 days, and it's a very intense design session where we basically question every assumption that they have about the product or about the business vision that they have. And we've seen this completely change the way stakeholders look at the product, about their business vision, and they come out of that who they're going to be servicing and what kind of product that they need to build. That's usually where we start, and that becomes the keystone that we build on for all of our wireframing, for all of our UI designs, and then later on all the technology built.
So what exactly excites you most about this industry?
There's a lot of talk about disruption, but I'm not a big fan of disruption. I think technology should be a helper, not a disruptor. So what I get most excited about is tools and products that help people do their jobs better. This has been an ongoing theme in all of our work. I love sitting down with hospital workers. I love sitting down with teachers and just understanding how they work and understanding how technology could transform and change the way they work in a completely positive manner without getting in their way, but optimizing them, helping them do things easier so they can focus on things that matter, like teaching and taking care of patients.
Yeah, healthcare I'm so fascinated with because I always think it's a really interesting ecosystem and all the privacy and, so what kind of stuff do people, out of curiosity, do they focus on when it comes to healthcare? Is it that you can get, patient records or book appointments or?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of work to be done in healthcare technology. It's a space that we've been in for the last 3 years, and it's fascinating to me. Both my parents are doctors, so it's a space that I've been involved in since I was very young. I helped them build their patient record system when I was a teenager, and they still use it to this day. And so I love working on healthcare. It just helps them. You can see the impact that you have through technology on people's lives. And there's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of privacy concerns, and you need to be very careful about that. You can't just come bursting in and moving data all around. You have to respect the existing regulations and rules. But I found that, you can easily work within those. It's just, understanding how people work and what is in small increments changing it.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating of an area because you're right. Healthcare seems to need a lot of help, but where do you start? Because it's such a complex ecosystem.
Yeah, and also, the cycles are long, like getting approved to go into a hospital as a new piece of technology, it might take years. So that's why startups in that space struggle. It requires a lot of grit, a lot of, long cycles of demos and training. But in the end, it's worth it because, once you're in there and you're having an impact, things move quicker.
Oh, for sure. I can imagine just everyone being so much more excited about things. So is healthcare the biggest area where you're seeing the biggest amount of growth in across all industries?
I think healthcare and education are the most interesting spaces that I actively look at right now. There is obviously a lot of movement in fintech and financial technologies. We have been in that space for a long time, and it keeps growing, and there's more and more investment in that space. So it's always interesting. Recently as Hipo, we've been working with a lot of blockchain companies in the US as well. And that's another fascinating space that I'm only, this year starting to learn more about and deep diving into. I think there's a lot of really interesting changes coming down the pipeline.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a big blockchain junkie. So yeah, you have me. And, because it could be across all industries and there's just so many things that it just will simplify. So it makes sense that UXUI design would correlate very nicely with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, make more accessible today, wiring money internationally is a huge pain for everyone involved. I don't think the banks are too happy about it either. So, there's a lot of institutional interest in technologies like blockchain, simplifying and making it cheaper and easier for users. So there's huge potential.
Oh, for sure. So for someone that, as a company that's looking into, trying to simplify the way, and maybe they're not convinced that they need to change, do you have any advice for them, the ones that kind of no, we're fine, we've been doing this for 20 years?
It's a tough situation, right? If there needs to be a champion, I found that there needs to be a champion within the organization pushing for change. That's usually how we've been able to get into larger orgs where, it's there's a lot of stakeholders involved and people are really not sure about how to move forward, even if they feel the pain and they see the need to change. But if there's one person, pushing the boundaries and, trying to change things, and they find some kind of outsource help, that's how we've been brought into larger orgs where, we made impact. Again, it's a long process, and you need to talk to a lot of people. There are internal politics involved, but it's possible. It's just it requires a lot of pushing, both from outside and from inside the organization.
No, that makes sense. Totally makes sense. So have you found that there's been like a big, huge lesson learned or aha moment there, in building your business and dealing with clients and, in this industry?
Too many probably. But, for me, I think my biggest learning in the past few years was the critical impact that good support can have. Like, support was an afterthought for a lot of the products that we worked on early on. And, it's a thankless job, and no software or product person really wants to be involved on the support side of things. But I learned by being involved in directly in the support channels for multiple products that we built, how influential it can be by connecting the product team to the support team and exposing the kinds of questions that come in to the developers and the designers of the product. You're able to have huge impact really quickly, because there are certain things that come in and the product designers go, oh, I never thought of that, and that people would use it that way. And then you see that question come in 1, 2, 10, 20 times, and then you realize, okay, we have to reprioritize this because a lot of people are suffering because of this design decision that we made. So being able to, expose the product team to the support channels, sometimes even having them do support, direct support, is a big learning that I had in the past few years, and it's something that we employ today. And I recommend everyone to do it.
No, that's really brilliant, because, that's a real big, huge challenge of getting them to kind of onboarded, aligned and focused, right? So, yeah. Oh, good. That's a good one. So in this journey, was there kind of any tools or resources that you were able to leverage from the government, or you suggest to companies that are starting up that they should leverage?
Yeah, a few. I mean, in Ontario, the Ontario Centers of Excellence were really helpful in a few of the products that we built, especially in healthcare and fintech. They provide support, they provide investment, even though it's small amounts, it's still meaningful, and they can match investments in some cases. So if you're raising a certain amount, they will match it. They also provide some hiring services, so they can put some really brilliant candidates in front of you without you having to do any HR work. They will just send you the CVs of these young, new graduates from some of the programs that they work with. So we've seen great support from them in the past few years. So I definitely recommend early stage startups looking at what they can offer. And another one I would say, it's not government per se, but it's the Waterloo community and the Waterloo's student hiring services. We made great use of them in the past 4 or 5 years, and the students who come in for either summer or winter terms are always absolutely brilliant, and they're eager to learn, and both sides benefit from that. So those are two of the great programs that we continue to work with.
Oh, this is great. And out of curiosity, if someone wanted to kind of do a career switch into UX UI design, and they're just kind of a little fascinated and wanted to learn more about it, is there any resources that you kind of mentioned to them that they should check out, or any tips about how to kind of do a career switch? Or
yeah, sure. I mean, there are a huge amount of tutorials and online courses available. I'm not well versed in those, but one organization that I know that's outputting some great candidates for us is Lighthouse Labs in Toronto. And they have been doing great work providing these courses in both design and development. And their candidates, they do some really good early stage learning for people who want to do career switching. So I think that or similar programs are a great place to start and kind of just boost your career switch.
No, that's great. I get that question quite a bit because people really kind of want to do something a little bit more innovative, more creative, and they want to help companies and businesses really kind of reshape the thinking because maybe it's from their own kind of personal pain or journey that they've gone through. But it's such a growing area. It's been a fast growing area for the past, a decade or two. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's more and more jobs, and there's no shortage of jobs, especially in Toronto tech scene, and it's just going to grow because there are more companies coming in from the US opening, offices in Toronto. There are more startups. There's more investments, as we've seen in the past 5 years. Toronto tech scene has grown tremendously. Another thing that I should mention is also meetups like Tech TO. There's Help TO, and there. You can't even keep up with them. There are so many. There's this meetup happening every night in Toronto, as far as I can tell. So attending those, asking people questions is a great way to not just network, but also learn about opportunities, learn about ways to, advance your career.
That's brilliant. And Taylan, being that you've built this massive empire, seriously, you've got a huge team, huge company, everything. Do you have any key business philosophies or favorite quote that kind of keeps you on track of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think for me, the key motto or key value has always been empathy. We built Hipo based on the idea of empathy, not just for our employees, but also for our customers, also for our customers' customers. We always try to put ourselves in their shoes and imagine what they would want to get out of a business relationship and approach things that way. In our day-to-day company culture, that reflects in our, the way we work and the way we really keep that work-life balance. Our retention rate is really high. We have people who have been with us for over 6 years. And I'm really proud of that. And I think all of that comes out of the empathy that we have for our employees, which in turn, they end up having empathy for the company. They end up having ownership in the company. So I think it's a great way to run a business. And I'm really glad we did it that way. And it works the same way for our customers. We don't see them as customers. It's more of a partnership between us and them. And we always approach it that way. We build the products as if we had full ownership of the product and we care about things. So I think that's been the single driving value behind everything that we did in the past decade.
Oh, that's great. I mean, empathy is such a skill itself these days, which is kind of funny because you think that everyone is very empathetic, that it's kind of natural, but it's something that you have to be much more conscious about.
Yeah, I think every decision that you make needs to run through that filter. It's easy to assume things about the other person or about the other company that you're dealing with. It's easy to, assume that everyone's out to get you in this cutthroat business world. So I think it's important to see things from their point of view and then try and find the middle ground. That doesn't mean there won't be conflicts, but at least you can approach them fairly and resolve them that way.
No, it's great. It's great. So I started this virtual book club a little while ago. So now I'm always fascinated with people recommend as books that things have really resonated with them. So do you have a book or something that kind of was like, oh, that's really amazing, or you're something that you're currently kind of playing around and reading?
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly reading one book or another or multiple ones at the same time nowadays to catch up. But for the past few years, I've been more focused on kind of science fiction and more fiction books rather than reading more nonfiction business books, which is something I did for years. I feel that fiction, especially science fiction, gives you a really interesting point of view about the, more of a kind of a longer look at what we're doing, why we're doing things, and where things are going. Recently, I have been reading, I'm still in the middle of reading Cory Doctorow's Radicalized, his new book that came out this year. And I find it to be an absolutely fascinating look at the future of copyright and IoT devices, as well as more political issues like immigration. And it's an absolutely fascinating book. I'm loving it. He gave a podcast interview recently. It was a software development podcast, but he talked about all the issues around, software development and, copyright protections and patents and all of that. So it's absolutely fascinating. I love his work.
Oh, I got to check this book out because it sounds interesting. I love science fiction too, because it always gives you a different perspective of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that's I read earlier this year was New York 2140. It's more about the climate crisis and how a possible future of humanity could look like. More of an optimistic look, but with some interesting ideas on adaptation and how cities would adapt, and how specifically New York would adapt. It was a fascinating book as well.
Oh, I got to check that out. Oh, great, because I need summer reading and things for the book club. So I'm always looking for things that, interest other people, because then I get kind of like, oh, I got to check it out. So anyways, now the summer is here. I'm guessing you're going to take some downtime. Is there a place that you kind of love to gravitate towards? We have a lot of international listeners, and they're always kind of fascinated of where people, especially Canadians, where they tend to kind of go to wind down or chill or...
Yeah, summer for me, I'm originally from Turkey, and summer for me is usually that part of the world. I love traveling to Greece or Turkey and seeing some family and being there. So, I think that's one of the best, sea vacations that you can take in the world. And I love going there. But in Toronto, I've recently been hanging out more in the Roncesvalles area, and I found this spot. They do these amazing breakfast burgers. I think it's just right up on Dundas and Roncesvalles, and it's an amazing place. It's kind of like this hidden spot that we discovered recently.
Oh, I love that. And finally, Taylan, you're so brilliant. How can people connect with you?
Thank you. I'm always happy to connect either on Twitter, just my name, Taylan Pince, or, I'm always happy to receive emails from entrepreneurs or people interested in products, or sci-fi. Taylan at hipolabs.com is always open. I'm a good emailer. I read and respond to every email. So, anyone can feel free to contact me.
Fantastic. I'll put all of those links in the show notes so everyone can just kind of click and tweet away to you.
Okay, awesome. Sounds great.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you so many for your insights.
Thank you so much, Satna. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining and listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode, please share with your friends and colleagues. You can share on social media, the email link, the newsletter, and so on. Let's continue to support these Canadian innovators and help them really grow into bigger brands. Awareness and knowledge is totally key. Anyways, I can't wait to talk to you next week. Cheers.